The moment she stepped into the room, everything changed. It was as if the air itself had thickened, heavy with memories and unspoken tension. "My father had that tattoo," she said, her voice trembling so much it barely reached the 5 Navy SEALs standing before her. Instantly, every head turned toward her. 5 hardened men, each trained to remain calm in the face of chaos, froze. Their eyes widened, hearts pounding, as if they were staring at a ghost they had thought long gone. No one spoke, not a word. Only the soft rustle of her fingers holding the faded photograph echoed through the quiet room. It wasn't just any tattoo. It was a symbol that carried a story, one that had been whispered in secret among soldiers, one that had meant life and death, survival and sacrifice. How do you know that?" a deep voice finally whispered. It came from the oldest of the SEALs, a man whose face was lined with years of war and sleepless nights. She looked down at the photograph again, tracing the faded ink with her small fingers. He never spoke about it," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "But he always told me, if anyone ever sees this, remember, I fought for something bigger than us." The men exchanged glances, their faces drained of color. Memories came crashing back, memories of a mission that had been a nightmare disguised as a plan, memories of the man who had carried them through impossible situations, who had laughed in the face of death, and who had vanished in the chaos. One of the younger SEALs swallowed hard, his jaw tight. Where did you see this?" he asked, voice shaky. "My father's things. I found an old photo in his drawer," the girl whispered, opening her hands to reveal a black and white image worn at the edges. In it, her father stood tall, young and proud, his forearm angled perfectly to reveal the tattoo. Even through the grainy quality of the photograph, the symbol was unmistakable. The room went completely silent again. It was a silence that carried decades of grief, regret, and respect. The tattoo wasn't just ink, it was a mark of courage, a signature of a man who had risked everything, and now it had returned to them in the form of his daughter. The girl's voice broke the silence again. "I never understood what it meant until I found this photo. I never knew the man behind it, the stories, the risks, everything." A SEAL stepped closer, his face a mixture of awe and sorrow. You don't understand what you're holding," his voice was low. "We thought he was gone. That tattoo, it was more than a mark. It was a promise, a warning, and a memory." She tilted her head, trying to comprehend the weight in his words. "A promise?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," the SEAL continued, his hands gripping his own knees, as if steadying himself. "That tattoo, it was his way of showing the world he carried something bigger than himself, something he couldn't explain, not to anyone, especially not to a child. It was a code, a symbol that only a few people would recognize, and now you recognize it." Her small fingers clutched the photo tighter. Her heart was pounding in her chest as the room seemed to shrink around her. I want to know," she said softly, tears spilling freely now. "I want to understand him, to understand what he did, what he gave up for others." The SEALs exchanged glances, their eyes glistening. None of them had expected this moment, to see the daughter of the man they had loved like a brother, alive, standing before them, and asking for the story that they had carried silently for years. It was almost too much to bear. One of them finally spoke, his voice almost a whisper, trembling with emotion. "He didn't talk about it because he didn't want anyone to worry, not even you. He wanted you to have a normal life, a childhood free from fear, from the things he faced every day." The girl nodded slowly, the tears streaming down her face. I didn't know he had friends like you," she admitted, her voice cracking. I thought he was alone in all of this, that no one else understood him." Another seal, the quietest of the group, stepped forward. His hands shook slightly as he reached toward the photo. "We did understand him," he said softly. "We were there. Every mission, every fight, every impossible night. We were brothers, and he was the bravest among us." Her eyes widened. You knew him?" "Yes," said the oldest seal, his voice thick with memories. "We fought beside him, laughed with him, and sometimes cried with him when things went wrong. He carried all of our fears and made them his own, and now, seeing you here, it's like a piece of him has returned." Her small hands trembled as she clutched the photo to her chest. I wish I had known. I wish I could have heard his stories. I wish I could have understood the man he was while he was still here." The room was silent again, but this time it wasn't a silence of shock. It was a silence of respect, of remembrance, of shared grief and honor. The 5 seals, each a hardened veteran of unimaginable missions, looked at this young girl and felt the weight of their own memories pressing down. The youngest seal finally spoke, his voice trembling but full of reverence. "He saved us, more times than I can count, and he trusted us with his life. That tattoo, it wasn't just ink, it was a symbol of his courage, of his love for his family. And now, it's a symbol that lives on in you." The lips trembled as she whispered, "Then, I want to know everything, every story, every memory. I want to understand him, so I can be proud." The seals nodded slowly, the weight of the past heavy in the air. They had waited years for this moment, an opportunity to honor the man they had lost, to share his legacy, to see his spirit reflected in someone he had loved more than life itself. One by one, they began to recount the stories, the missions that no one else knew about, the moments of fear and courage, the laughter, the loss, and the brotherhood that had defined them all. And as the girl listened, tears streaming down her face, she began to understand. She understood that the tattoo wasn't just a mark of the past, it was a key to a legacy of bravery, love, and sacrifice that had been hidden from her until now. And in that quiet, tension-filled room, a young girl and 5 Navy SEALs shared something deeper than words, a connection to a man who had lived, fought, and loved so fiercely that his memory would never die. The girl sank into a chair, clutching her father's worn journal as if it were the last lifeline to a world she had never known. Her hands shook, and her breath came in small, uneven gasps. I never knew what this meant," she whispered, opening the cover carefully, as though even the slightest motion could shatter the fragile link to her father. One of the seals stepped forward slowly, his face lined with fatigue and old scars. "You're holding something precious," he said, his voice low and trembling. "That journal, those words, your father wrote them for you. Even if he never said them out loud, he wanted you to know he loved you and believed in you." She blinked back tears. "I didn't even know he had friends like you," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought he was alone, that no one understood him." Another seal, the quietest of the 5, shook his head, his eyes glinting with the reflection of old pain. "You don't understand," he said softly, almost to himself. "He wasn't alone. We were there. Through every mission, every night that felt impossible, we were there, and he carried all of it, even when he came home to you, so you wouldn't have to know the fear he faced every day." The girl leaned forward, her hands shaking as she opened the first page. Her father's handwriting, slanted and careful, stretched across the yellowed paper. She read aloud, her voice soft but determined. "If something happens to me, tell my daughter I loved her and that she must live without fear." A heavy silence fell over the room. The words weren't just letters on a page, they were a lifeline, a message from a father she had loved but never fully understood. The seals watched her, their expressions a mixture of grief and reverence. The oldest seal, his voice thick with emotion, spoke. "Your father, he saved all of us more times than I can count. That night, the mission we thought we'd never survive, he carried everyone through. And now, seeing you here, it's like he's right in the room with us again." Tears streamed down her face as she asked, "Tell me everything. I need to know who he was, what he did, why he fought so hard." The men nodded slowly. One by one, they began to share the memories that had haunted them for years, the missions that no one could ever write about, the nights they had almost lost everything, and the man who had carried them all. "We were pinned down," one SEAL said, his voice trembling, "and it looked like there was no way out. Bullets everywhere, explosions shaking the ground. Everyone was terrified, but he stayed calm. He laughed, cracked a joke even in the middle of chaos, and somehow he made us believe we could survive." Another SEAL leaned back, his eyes distant. "He had this look, you know the one, like nothing could touch him, and we believed it, even when everything was falling apart. I lost count of how many times he pulled someone from the line of fire, risking his own life without a second thought. He never wanted glory, he just wanted to keep us alive." The girl clutched the journal tighter, tears soaking the pages. "Why didn't he ever tell me?" she asked, voice shaking. "Because he loved you," another SEAL said quietly. "He wanted you to grow up safe. He wanted you to have a life without fear, and so he carried it all alone, even when it broke him inside. That tattoo, it wasn't just a symbol of courage, it was a promise to protect you." She looked down at the photograph again, her fingers tracing the faded lines of the tattoo. "I can't believe all of this, that he did all of this and I didn't even know." The youngest SEAL, who had remained silent for most of the conversation, spoke up. His voice was low, but each word carried weight. "He was extraordinary. He didn't seek recognition. He didn't want anyone to know how brave he was. And yet here you are, holding a piece of his story. That makes him alive in a way that nothing else could." She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Then, please tell me everything, every detail. I want to understand him so I can be proud." One by one, the SEALs began to recount the missions, their voices weaving a tapestry of courage and fear, loss and brotherhood. They spoke of nights when the world was dark and cold, when bullets tore through the air, when the only thing keeping them alive was the unwavering courage of the man they had loved like a brother. They told her about the time your father had risked everything to save a team trapped behind enemy lines, carrying them through mud and blood while the world burned around them. They spoke of the small moments too, the laughter in the barracks, the quiet conversations before a mission, the encouragements whispered to soldiers who had lost hope. Every story painted a portrait of a man who was more than a soldier. He was a protector, a friend, a father who had sacrificed so much for others. Tears flowed freely down her cheeks as she listened, her heart swelling with pride and grief. "I wish I could have known him this way. I wish I could have seen the man behind the father I loved." The SEALs shared stories of bravery so profound it left her speechless. She heard about nights when her father had been the last to retreat, ensuring everyone else was safe, even when he was injured and alone. She learned how he had risked his life to save strangers, to protect his team, and how he had always carried the memory of his family as a guiding light. As the stories unfolded, the girl realized that the tattoo wasn't just a symbol, it was a key to her father's life, a bridge to his courage, his love, and his sacrifices. She read another line from the journal. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to face it for those you love." Her voice shook, but there was determination in her tone. One of the SEALs nodded. That was him, every day, every mission. He never gave up. He fought not just for himself, but for the people he loved and for the people he would never meet. And now, you carry his legacy forward. The girl looked up, tears in her eyes, but her posture was strong. Then I will honor him, she whispered. I will never forget him, and I will make sure everyone knows the man he was, the hero he became. The SEALs nodded, a mixture of pride and sorrow filling the room. They had lost their brother in arms, but through this girl, the memory of her father and all that he stood for would live on. As she closed the journal and held it close, she realized something profound. Her father's courage had not just saved lives, it had created a legacy that she could now carry forward. The room, once heavy with shock and silence, now felt alive with remembrance, honor, and the quiet strength of a hero whose story would never be forgotten. Hours had passed, yet the room felt timeless. Outside, the sun was dipping low, spilling golden light through the dusty windows, but inside, the young girl and the 5 Navy SEALs were trapped in the world of memory, grief, and revelation. The journal lay open on her lap, its pages worn, its words alive. She lifted her eyes, meeting each of the SEALs' gazes. "I feel like I know him now," she whispered, her voice soft but full of emotion. "I feel like he's been here all along, speaking to me through your stories." One of the SEALs, the oldest, nodded slowly. "He was always here," he said. "Even when you couldn't see him, even when he was far away, he carried you in his heart. That's why he did everything he did. He wanted you to be safe, to grow up without fear, to live a life full of hope and love." The girl's hands trembled as she hugged the journal tightly. "I wish I could have told him I'm proud, that I understand now." One of the SEALs, the oldest, nodded slowly. "You can still honor him," another SEAL said, his voice low, filled with the weight of decades of missions and sacrifice. "By remembering him, by telling his story, by living the values he stood for, that's how you carry him forward." The youngest SEAL, who had been quiet for most of the conversation, leaned forward. His voice was soft but certain. "You know, he always believed in passing courage forward. He believed that fear isn't the enemy, it's what you do with it that matters, and now that courage is yours to carry." The girl looked at him, determination flickering in her tear-filled eyes. "Then I will carry it. I will be brave, just like him, and I will honor his life in everything I do." The SEALs exchanged glances, a mixture of pride and sorrow passing between them. They had lost their brother in arms long ago, but through this young girl, a piece of him was alive once more, a spark of hope, of legacy, of heroism that could never be erased. She traced the tattoo in the photograph one more time, her fingers trembling. "It's more than ink," she whispered. "It's a symbol of love, of courage, of sacrifice." One of the SEALs, who had been silent for much of the morning, spoke softly. "He believed that every action mattered, even the ones no one saw, the risks, the missions, the nights he couldn't come home. He carried all of it so that you could have this moment, so you could grow up knowing he loved you." The girl closed her eyes, imagining her father standing beside her. She could feel his smile, hear his voice, feel the warmth of his embrace. "I can feel him now. I can feel his pride, his love, even his regrets. I will never let them fade." The oldest SEAL rested a hand on her shoulder. "That's the thing about legacy," he said. "It's not about medals or recognition or even life itself. It's about what you leave in the hearts of those you love, and he left everything in yours." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but this time they weren't just tears of grief. They were tears of connection, understanding, and purpose. I understand now. I understand why he did what he did, and why he loved me so fiercely." The girl opened the journal once more, flipping to the last page. She read aloud, her voice trembling but strong. "Live without fear. Love without limits. Be brave even when the world is dark. Remember me not with sorrow, but with courage." The seals watched her, hearts heavy with emotion. These words, her father's final message, had survived through war, through danger, through loss, and now, through her, they would continue to inspire courage. "I will," she whispered, hugging the journal close. "I will be brave. I will live without fear. I will honor him every single day." One seal, his voice cracking, spoke next. "He trusted you. He knew you would carry his spirit forward. That trust, it's the greatest gift he could give." The room fell into a gentle silence. For the first time that day, it wasn't a silence of shock or grief. It was a silence of reverence, of love, of shared understanding. The girl and the 5 men had formed a bond, forged in the fire of stories, tears, and memories. She stood slowly, the journal clutched to her chest. "I will tell his story," she said, her voice steady now. "I will share the lessons he taught, the courage he showed, and the love he gave. People will know the man he was, the hero he became." The seals nodded, pride and sorrow mingling in their eyes. "He would be proud of you," one of them said softly, "more than words could ever explain. You've carried him through darkness, and now you'll carry his light forward." The girl walked towards the window, sunlight washing over her face. She could feel her father's presence, not just in memory, but in the way she breathed, in the strength in her hands, in the resolve in her heart. "I will honor him in everything I do. I will live with courage. I will love without fear, and I will make him proud." One of the seals spoke last, his voice almost a whisper. "Remember, courage is contagious. Your father showed it, we lived it, and now it lives in you. Never forget that." The girl turned, looking at each of them. "I will not forget, I promise." As she left the room, journal in hand, the sun dipped below the horizon, but inside her a new light was rising, a light of bravery, of love, of legacy. A father's sacrifice, the team's courage, and a daughter's determination had all converged in this single moment, and somehow, despite the grief and the loss, hope had taken root. For the first time, the seals felt a sense of peace. The man they had lost had left more than memories behind. He had left a legacy, living through the girl who now carried his courage, his love, and his story. The girl whispered one last time to herself as she walked into the future. "I will make sure the world knows him, the man who gave everything for love, for courage, and for life." And in that quiet, fading light, a young girl, 5 Navy SEALs, and the memory of one extraordinary man shared a moment that would never be forgotten. A moment where love, courage, and legacy collided, and where the story of a hero lived on through the next generation.